All right. What's up, guys? We are back at it. Drew from the Sober Fix podcast. If anyone is just checking this channel out, I hope you enjoy it. We talk about addiction, recovery, sobriety, just living our best life. I bring on a bunch of guests. Today we have Brandon on. And I saw Brandon first on TikTok. He makes a bunch of cool videos about MAT treatment, 7-0, Kratom, his experience with addiction, and now in sobriety. So I hope you enjoy this episode. He's raw, man. He tells it all. Losing his mom and turning to alcohol at first. And he struggled with alcohol for a few years and eventually went to rehab. He had a couple DUIs. He got sober from that. And then later on ran into Kratom and 7-0, which is it's a new thing now. It's a new thing that people are taking. They're getting stuck on. It's got horrible withdrawals. And I was happy to bring him on and share a different aspect of recovery. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Don't forget, subscribe. Get that sign stuck in your head. Let's get into it. What's going on, everyone? We're back. Another episode of the Sober Fix podcast. I just want to say thank you to anyone who has tuned in lately and has subscribed and has commented. I have got just the most brutally honest, transparent comments lately. Like just straight up people saying, look, I need help. I can't stop doing meth. My boss is figuring out. My life is going down the tubes. I can't stop drinking. Just so many comments that I can relate to, and I try and respond to them all, and I appreciate them. And today's another exciting day. I say it all the time, but anytime I have a guest on, it is exciting stuff. And we got Brandon Lavoie on. You might recognize him. He has a super cool TikTok page where he talks about his experience with a bunch of different stuff, MAT treatment, 7-0, just a bunch of stuff. So Brandon, I'm excited to have you on, man. How are you doing today?
Great, Drew. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. I came across your TikTok page, and I like what you're doing over there.
Yeah, man. I'll say the same to you, and I want to kind of start off in the beginning. Let us know where do you live now, and where did you grow up?
I am from Louisiana, right around the New Orleans area. I grew up there. I am 40 years old now. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, probably about my daughter's 7, probably about 8 years ago. And I've been here since then. Yeah.
Cool, man. And what was childhood like for you?
Childhood was good. So when you get sober or you start attending meetings and whatnot, you got to go back and you got to figure out kind of, where you went wrong, the traumas in your life. I mean, most people with addictions, I would say all of them have some sort of trauma that they grew up with. I had a very good childhood. I was raised by a single mother, but we lived in, so let me back up. We lived in a suburb of New Orleans. My mother, we lived in kind of like a converted apartment for my great grandparents' house. And so I had her, I had my great grandma, my great grandpa, I had family around me. I was very loved, is what I remember from back in the day. And it was good. My mother met my stepfather basically when I was 13. And we moved in with them, and he had his own thing. He had like a son and a daughter, so my step siblings. And I think that was kind of like the first trauma or so that I'd went through, was just being kind of ripped away from my entire family and go and live with these people. My stepbrother, he was kind of into, looking back now, it's not a big deal, but he smoked pot and stuff. I was 13 years old. But at the time, it was like, oh my God, he's doing drugs. I had never even thought about doing drugs. And so that was kind of a learning experience, and I think a lot of my issues stem from that event, so it kind of feels, like I wasn't beaten, I wasn't abused or anything like that, but everyone's trauma is unique to themselves. And that kind of laid the foundation, I think, for like that inner feeling of not feeling good enough. Um, yeah. But so we moved in with them, and it was good. He was a good stepfather. Like, we grew up kind of poor, but he was well established and whatnot. So um, I did that for a while, and yeah.
Yeah, man, it's a lot that I could relate to, especially I remember growing up, I had a good childhood. I didn't have, neither one of my parents were addicts like myself. Rarely drank. I've talked about this before. My dad would get drunk like once a year, and it was like 4th of July, and he'd be in bed till like 2 p.m. The only day he like slept in a bunch was after like the 4th of July, because he never drank. And it was interesting because I just didn't have, because you hear and like you talked about the kind of recovery rooms and stuff. You hear about trauma and it's interesting. And kind of what I found is I had a good childhood, but my kind of trauma related stuff started to happen once I was on the drugs, and it was kind of after. But I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is. We deal with kind of our own forms of trauma, whatever it is, and it could be different for everyone. And I want to ask you, so as you move in and you start kind of integrating into the family of your stepfather and stuff, did you notice that you felt kind of off during that period?
For sure. And, looking back, growing up without my biological father, and that's another thing, like, I don't know anything about him. And so I think that kind of subconsciously planted that seed of like abandonment trauma, that feeling of maybe not feeling good enough, like, just thinking, if I was better, he would have stayed, or something along those lines. Um, and then moving in with my step family, me and my brother, he was very different from me, and he had like his family. I was moving into his world. And so that kind of compounded the feeling of like not fitting in, not being good enough, because we were like kind of polar opposites. He smoked. I was like, no, I'm never doing it. And so, always trying to like either mask how I was really feeling about the entire situation, or trying to be someone that fit in.
Yeah, and I think that's very relatable. And it's interesting. I saw a clip the other day. It was Dr. Drew, and he was talking about how, many people, they have some type of trauma, or maybe they don't fit in, or there's something that bothers them, or maybe they don't regulate emotions very well as a child. And then all of a sudden, and they feel uncomfortable all the time, and they're angry and kind of sometimes withdrawn. We all handle that kind of stuff differently. But then he was talking about when they discover a substance, right? So let's say you have someone who is just feels like they don't fit in their entire life, or something just feels off, right? And then all of a sudden they're sitting around in a circle with their friends trying alcohol or weed for the first time. And for the first time ever, that feeling of not fitting in goes away. And it's like, how do you tell someone that has just experienced this relief for the first time, this relief from feeling different than or not fitting in, that they shouldn't do this again? It was you kind of reminded me of some of the things you said about that clip. Where did, where did substances start to come into your life? How old were you when that kind of started to be introduced to you?
Well, interestingly enough, I held out on not taking drugs or substances until, what was it? I was probably around 18 when I finally decided to try, marijuana for the first time. But so what happened was, and this kind of tells more about, the trauma and whatnot. So we move in with my step family. I was very, very close with my mother. We were like, single mom. And when she started dating him, it happened really fast. Like, they met in January. By June, they were married.
Oh,
So
wow.
like 6 months, I went from like, in my world, happy, content to being ripped away within 6 months. We moved about an hour and a half from my family. So not only did I lose all my friends, I lost my family as well. And just that sense of not being in control was very tough. But I remember when my mom was telling me, we were talking, and I was like, if you do this, like the relationship's not going to be the same. Like it can't be the same, you know? And I made sure of that. I made sure that once we did move in, I mean, compound with the fact that I was 13. So you have like your normal teenage angst, rebellion going through. On top of that, I really made it a point to be like an asshole to her, and just kind of make her pay for doing this. And so we moved in at 13, and then coincidentally, I just finally get established. Like it had been like 2 years. I finally made friends. I had a girlfriend and everything, working out. And then for whatever reason, they didn't decide. They went bankrupt, my family. I guess they were not the best with money. So then we end up having to move yet again. Again, we have to move a couple years later. And it was just like rehashing of all of that. And this kind of plays into my overall sense of like, something's going to happen. Why get attached to anything when it's going to be ripped away from me? So we moved to yet another location a couple hours away from the friends that I just established. I again go to high school. So this is like junior year, right? Well, actually, this is senior year. We decided, I'm sorry, let me back up. You might have to cut this. This is kind of
Oh, you're
not
good.
used to, you just kind of put in my spot. Give me a second. All right. So I'm sorry. What is the question?
We were just talking about like, so your junior year, you just had to move for the second time, and I had asked like, where did marijuana come in?
Okay. All right. You asked the substances thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So substances didn't really come into around. I was about 18, but how can I put this? I'm sorry, dude. I'm really just like,
Oh, no, you're good. And I'm just going to say this real quick, too. Your story's pretty similar to mine because you said the good childhood thing first. And then you also said that you started to turn to stuff at 18, which is interesting because you hear a lot of stories, like especially in the recovery rooms or online and stuff, when you hear people that have been through addiction. You hear like 10, 11, you hear some people say like 8 years old, so I was going to add that I find that interesting that you were kind of a late bloomer when it comes to addiction. I know there's people that start at like their 40s too, but similar story to mine in that starting at 18, but yeah, man, I'm excited. I want to hear how you started, how you found the marijuana.
Well, okay, so like I said, I held out for a long time, but really what triggered the substance use was my stepdad was very much into horses. And when we moved in, we all started riding horses. It was fun. Fast forward, we moved for the second time, bankruptcy, all that stuff goes down. We would just ride horses. No big deal. Well, my mother actually got thrown from a horse at some point, and she fell like on a log, hit her side. No big deal. You get thrown off horses all the time. Well, this particular side pain persisted for, I don't know, a couple months or something like that. So she goes to the doctor to finally get it checked out, right? And it turns out that she has stage 4 lung cancer. And,
no.
Yeah. And she died about 5 weeks later.
Oh, man.
So,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And so I think that's where the substance use finally started to kick in. Like I kind of started to dabble with marijuana right before that instance happened. But then again, coming back to that second move, I found some friends that smoked. And I even held off smoking for like a couple of months then. It was still like this taboo thing. I'm not going to smoke. Finally, peer pressure, whatever. I don't want to blame it on them, but I did start to smoke pot, and it was fun. It was great. I was connecting with this group of friends, which is something I desperately needed because we moved again. And like that second move, I was just very closed off. I would walk. I remember specifically walking around during lunchtime, just walking, just pretending to be busy because I didn't know anybody. And I wasn't outgoing enough to like try and meet people. And of course, the friends that I did kind of know, they had a different lunch, so couldn't hang out with them. But the marijuana, the pot, the smoking is finally made me like kind of fit in with this group. And so, but then after she passed, that's when the heavy substances started to kick in. Alcohol, for sure. I was 18, 19. I remember my stepdad would actually buy, a bottle of Jaeger for the weekend. I should back up. He worked offshore. And for those that don't know, he worked like from Louisiana. He worked in the Gulf of Mexico. So he would go and he would leave for like 3 weeks at a time, come back. He'd be home for 3 weeks, leave for 3 weeks. So he would give me and my friends a bottle of alcohol on the weekend. We do our thing and that would be it. My mother also got prescribed a lot of pain medication because she was in cancer. So after she passed, I found that stash. Like the friends that I'd kind of started to hang out with, they knew about pills. They knew about all the different types of drugs. And so I started taking her old pain medications and her Xanax and drinking a lot more, smoking a lot more. I got my first DWI when I was 18, right after she passed, because I was on
me
Xanax.
Too.
Yeah. Yeah. That was probably the best jail experience because I was so messed up on Xanax. It was really fast.
Me too.
I slept through it. And it was my first time getting arrested. So my stepdad just came and got me, So that was a sign of things to come as far as the substance abuse goes.
Yeah, man. Oh, wow. It's crazy. Your story. There's just a lot of points that I can relate to. And I'm kind of envisioning you. You've moved now for the second time. You're in high school. You said you're walking around acting like you're busy just because you don't really know anyone. And when you're not super outgoing, that's a hard time because in high school, people have really formed a lot of their groups. They've been hanging out with each other for years. Maybe they play sports together, whatever. It can be an awkward time. And then with your mom, man, I'm sorry to hear that. It's like, I can kind of relate to that in a way, not at all close to the severity of what you were going through. But I remember a friend of mine passing away around 18 and it was the same kind of thing. It was after I had found friends that were smoking weed and stuff, and I started to experience the kind of the relief of that, and it was a ton of fun. I just loved doing it. But I do remember after he passed, and I remember going through a breakup around that time. It was kind of like the perfect storm. It was the first time where my behavior with marijuana and it started to change because it was no longer just about fun. I was starting to use it to kind of grieve a little bit. Like my relationship with it was starting to change. I was starting to rely on it a little bit more. And then I wanted to touch on this too as well. The DUI, man, my first DUI was because of Xanax. And I remember taking a couple Xanax. I remember going to this party. I was like a year, maybe less than a year out of high school. And I was there with a bunch of friends that I used to play soccer with. So these were people that I knew from high school, but they had never seen me messed up. So all of a sudden I'm there on Xanax. And I remember I was also doing cocaine that night. And I remember drinking a ton of this whiskey. And I ended up getting a DUI that night, and I hit a light pole and everything, and I remember going to jail for like the night, but same thing. I was so out of it, and it was my first DUI. And so I walked out of there, they didn't hold me. But I just want to ask you, did you notice kind of at that time where you started to do the old pills that your mom had, and now you're turning to alcohol on the weekends as well, and you're smoking weed with the new friends that you have? Did you notice your relationship with these substances or drugs or alcohol? Did you notice it starting to change, like where you were relying on it more?
Looking back, no, because uh I didn't like the idea of it being a problem hadn't even entered my mind as far as like being an alcoholic, being dependent, using it to mask my feelings. Like I'm 18. I just, that thought had never even, it hadn't crossed my mind. It wasn't until much later, well, not much later, in my early 20s when I finally realized that the substance abuse was an issue. To me at the time, I thought of it as just like, I'm just a kid. I'm just doing, kids do drugs, kids drink, not kids, but, teenagers. And, this is a normal thing. Louisiana is very heavy on the drinking culture. Bourbon Street, New Orleans, all of my family drank. Like it wasn't something that, a lot of my family drank to excess and it was not looked down upon. Um, and then the prescription pain meds, I guess my dad was oblivious. He was offshore and he was dealing with his own problems, his own loss. Um, so it really didn't enter my mind as a problem for quite some time.
Yeah, man, I remember having the same. I remember my thinking when I was 18. Like there was no way anyone could tell me or convince me that it was problematic. Like there's no way, even after I got that DUI, like that was nothing. The DUI was like that was a tiny speed bump, because I was just having so much fun at that time. And if someone were to sit me down and say, "Look, man, something's going on with you. You're starting to black out. You're going pretty hard.
Mhm.
You already have a DUI. You're not even old enough to drink, but you already have a DUI." Like if they would have sat me down and kind of tried to talk to me at that time, there's no way I could have heard it. There's just no way. And I actually remember I had to go to a couple meetings for that DUI, and that was my introduction into kind of 12-step world or just the recovery world in general. And man, I remember people telling me all these horror stories in those meetings and stuff, and I was like, I couldn't even hear it. Like they told me, like, oh, if you have a problem, it's going to get really bad later on in life. But I was like, whatever, dude, this is not my place. I'm just going to get my court card signed and move on. Did you have to do anything for that DUI? Did you have to go to any meetings, or did you guys have like, I'm not sure what they do over there in Louisiana, but what'd you have to do for that first DUI?
For that first DUI, I don't remember anything important that was done. Pay a fine. I might have had to go to one class or something like that, but nothing, no consequence great enough for me to snap out of it. It actually wasn't until, and we'll probably get there, my third DWI that I was required to go to community service, like 240 hours. And that's when I started going to AA. This was my almost probably close to 30 when that finally happened. But just to go back and touch back on it, yeah, my stepdad didn't pull me aside and be like, "Hey, this is a problem." He was dealing with his own stuff, like I said. So never anything from him. My friends, they were drinking and doing drugs as well. So we just laughed it off. My family was like, when we moved again, my family was still not there. So there was no one really there, friends, family, or anything to kind of point that out that, hey, you're headed in a bad direction.
Yeah. It's hard too when people are drinking with you and stuff. It's like, we're not going to stop this. We're having too much fun here. Like we are there. We're not stopping this train yet. I want to ask you, how did you get the second one? What happened with the second DUI?
The second one, that was in college. So I moved. We were in when my mom passed. We were in a place called Thibodaux, Louisiana, home of Thibodaux. She passed. I hung around for like another year or so. I finally went off to college in Lafayette, which is about an hour and a half west of where I was. So now we got the college scene coming in, which brings all the drinking. And the town that I was in Louisiana at the time was very well known for not caring about your age. The bars, the clubs, they would all let you drink. They would card you, but nobody cared. And that's when I started getting into restaurant scene, and those who worked in restaurants know that drinking and drugs is completely acceptable and probably a requirement to work in a restaurant. I was a back of the house cook. And then so my second one, I had gotten back into Xanax again. And I remember I was on my way to work and I was on it, and I got pulled over for trying to like cut through a parking, like a corner a corner gas station. Cop pulls me over, and again on Xanax. I don't think at that one I was drinking, but no, it was both drinking and Xanax. So the first one I wasn't drinking, it was only Xanax. The second one, it was both. And so even that one, even the second one didn't even slow me down or stop me, because I was still just surrounded by acceptability. Everyone in the restaurant drank, and I got the pills from the guys in the restaurant. So still not a heavy enough consequence for me to admit or recognize that it was a problem.
Yeah, it sounds like, man, we just had problems with Xanax. Like it's interesting because I would take that stuff and it would just make me crave everything else. Like I just wanted to take everything to the next level when it came to getting messed up. I wanted to drink. I didn't care. Like I could have like court the next day or probation the next day or school the next day. And the second I take a Xanax, man, it was such trouble for me. I'd be chasing drinking. I'd be trying to get a hold of everything else. And the thing that was scary about Xanax is I just didn't have any anxiety because that's what it treats, right? So like hopping in my car after drinking, it was like, I'll be fine. Like I'm good. Like, and people are like, no, dude, you're going to get another DUI. Do you want another DUI? And I'm like, no, I don't want another DUI, but don't worry about it. I'm okay, And that's what was scary about Xanax for me is I didn't have the anxiety that I should have had for whatever I was doing at that time, if that makes any sense. But so you get the second DUI, you still don't kind of think there's a problem. Where did you start? Was there a period of time where you started to kind of notice the consequences, where you started to kind of see, look, this is getting worse. I might need to maybe just slow down a little bit. Can you think back on a time where you started to recognize the problems you were facing?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I was always just in denial about it, but a lot of it, looking back, was me running from dealing with my mother's passing. Throughout the whole process from finding out she was diagnosed till she actually passed, I think I had maybe cried or grieved a handful of times. I remember crying when we found out, because I was in the office with her in the exam room when they told her. But a lot of it was completely trying to keep that bottled up. I saw at the time that not crying, not expressing emotion as a sign of strength. Like, that was my superpower in a way at the time, thinking that I'm not going to let this get to me. It's not going to get to me. I'm fine. People die. It's not a big deal. And so like I would not allow myself to feel those emotions. So I'm just constantly stuffing them down. And so I really didn't think it was, or didn't start to acknowledge it as a problem until I had said my third DWI. Same story. It doesn't matter. Got drunk, pulled over, third DWI. For this one, I had gotten 240 hours of community service, some fines and stuff. And I had to go to AA classes. That was the first time I had been, required to do it. The first time I'd been into meetings. And, the third DWI, I had to call my aunt, and I did recognize, okay, so the third DWI, I was like, okay, this is a problem, right? And so I did get sober. I cleaned up for a while, a few months, and then I started slowly drinking again. But no one was telling me anything, like still. So what happened is I was working at Chili's at the time, restaurant scene. I was almost to the end of my sentence, or I should say like my probation. My probation was wrapping up. and I had just maybe 20 hours of community service left, some fines to pay. The fines were manageable. It was like under $1,000. But like I said, I'm working at Chili's, drinking. I get drunk one night and I call my boss and I demand a raise. And of course, he doesn't give me the raise. He can tell I'm drunk. So like I quit on the spot, right? And like that was not the right choice for many reasons. But one of the main reasons is because I needed that money to pay the fine to close out my probation to be done with everything. And that's when it really started hitting me because like I call in, I don't have a job, I'm drunk, I'm still walking to the store to get more alcohol at this time. I remember it specifically, like because where I lived at, I could just walk to the grocery store and get alcohol. I mean, I had breathalyzer in my truck and everything, so I couldn't drive there. And I remember going there and being like, this is a problem. Like, I should not be drinking at all. And yet I could not control myself. Like, I could not stop myself and turn around. And thankfully, as a part of the community service, and the probation and all that stuff, I was required to go to outpatient treatment. And so we were doing groups and whatnot once a week or whatever. And that's when I finally went in there and I would be like, hey, I've got a problem. I can't control myself. I told them the whole situation and whatnot. And that's how I got basically into rehab on that third time for alcohol. And so like I couldn't pay rent. I was only able to pay my last bit of probation or fees because I went live with my family because I took all my money and just paid it off, and then I went off to rehab for that.
Wow, man. Yeah. And when you're talking about, calling your boss drunk, demanding a raise, getting denied, quitting on the spot. I mean, it sounds like something I've done before. And then, but I love how you mentioned you put it into such great words. It's so easy to relate to is, you're starting to experience consequences and your decisions that you're making because of alcohol or whatever substance it is, it just starts to affect your life. And that's how it was for me too. I remember making decisions like that where I quit jobs that I need, or maybe I end relationships that I enjoy, or whatever the case is. But here was the kicker. It was like, no matter what's going on in my life, I had to walk to that liquor store. I had to. It's like, no matter what's going on around me, everything could be on fire, but I have to maintain what I'm doing. It's not, stopping was never an option for me for a long time. It was like, no matter what was happening, there was many things that were pointing towards me and saying, look, man, you need to make some changes here. You're not getting very good results out of life. But I just couldn't do it, So I just want to say that there's a ton of stuff that's so similar for me as well. And I want to kind of ask you, what was that like going into rehab? What was rehab like for you?
Rehab was great for me at the time. It was a state sponsored, funded rehab, so I didn't pay anything for it. That was great. Uh, I had been, have you, I mean, you've done the 12 steps, you said, and you're aware of all that. I had the gift of desperation at the time. And so I walked in there with an open mind. I was ready to quit. I had fully surrendered and accepted that I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable, and I had the evidence to support that. So since it was a state sponsored rehab, it was not the best of rehabs. It was like an old rundown school way up north in Louisiana. It was moldy. The showers were nasty and whatnot, but it was my second chance at the time. It was a way for me, and my family totally supported me. I was able to come clean and admit to everyone, including myself, that I had a problem, and they were there for me. So I went in there with the support. They had a program where you could get out of rehab, and they would put you in. It was like a halfway house, but it was like a big, like 150 man halfway house, like 4 beds to a room. It was called Job Company, and they would take you to your job. They would basically support you to get back on your feet. And I could have went back with family, but I chose to go this route because I did not want to put that burden on them. I messed up. I wanted to fix it. I knew I could do it. So that's the route I went. And rehab was great for me. It opened my eyes up to the 12-step program. I was kind of gone beforehand, but it was very much in and out. Just sign my paper, let me get out of here, not sticking around. And so that's when I really started to, at the rehab, embrace the 12 steps, the concepts, the psychology behind, your inventories and resentments and all that. I did really well in rehab. And I got out and I did do the job company thing. And that's how I found plumbing, which is my profession to this day. But it was an overall good experience.
Wow, man, that's cool stuff. And I like that you talk about too, like the gift of desperation. I made a video about that last week, and it's interesting as I was thinking about it because it's one of the few things in life that you just can't buy. You can't buy it. It's not something that that someone else can hand to you and give you. It's not something I can necessarily even learn. It's just this accumulation of everything is what I talked about in this video that kind of got me to a place where I said, I just need to do something different. And I like that you call it the gift of desperation, because it really is. And a lot of us don't realize it at the time. It's like, man, when we finally get to a place where we're willing to start treating our addiction, man, it's a big deal, and it's good stuff. I'm glad that you had a good experience with rehab, and I want to ask you, where did you, so after rehab, you transitioned, you're doing the job place, and they're kind of getting you back on your feet. How did you stay sober outside of rehab? Because I was someone that always would go right back to drinking. How did you maintain sobriety after that?
Well, after getting out of rehab, I did the job company for 6 months. That's how long you could stay there. Then you had to leave. So it was pretty easy to stay sober there. I was fresh out of rehab, but you were required to go to meetings every day. And I had made friends with, he was my roommate at the job company, and we kind of hung out, stuck together. So I was surrounded by people who were on the same page as me. That's a big one. We did end up at the 6-month mark, me and this friend of mine, we did end up getting our own place together, our own apartment. So that helped as well, being with, roommates with him. We were on the same page. And so, and I found a job. I got into plumbing. So plumbing is more of a career. So I was kind of focused on that. And that's really how I did it, was just kind of staying focused on the program.
That's cool, man. And I know a lot of your stuff that a lot of videos that you talk about on TikTok, you talk about a 7-0. And I remember when we were messaging each other, kind of scheduling this podcast interview, you mentioned that you had gotten off alcohol and that later on ended up dealing with 7-0. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of 7-0 is? Just, just very brief, kind of what it is and kind of how you came to find it.
Yeah, 7-OH, 7-hydroxymetrageny is kind of relatively new chemical that's come on the market. It is basically loosely derived from kratom. The kratom plant, it comes in capsule form. It's powder. It's kind of like it acts over the opioid receptors. But 7-O is from my, I'm not a scientist, disclaimer, anything like that, but 7-hydroxymetrageny occurs naturally within the kratom itself, but in very small trace amounts, like not enough to actually feel anything at all. It's actually only produced once your liver processes it, or the dried out stage of creating the actual capsules. And it is something like 10 to 13 times more addictive or potent than morphine, this stuff. And so it is, but make no mistake, it is a fully synthetic chemical. Like it takes a chemist in a lab doing their magic and whatnot to create 7-Os. But the problem is that it's marketed as a kratom alkaloid. 7 ohms is one of the original ones. It says on there kratom alkaloid. And that's a big problem because it is way more addictive and potent than kratom. I mean, I didn't go down the opiates. I luckily kind of missed that train. I did a little lower tabs and whatnot, but people definitely compare it to, your oxys and your H and Fent and stuff. So it's definitely nothing to mess around with.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talk about that. That was something that I did all the different opiates. That was my main thing, but I missed this one, because that wasn't really popular just before I got sober. But I'm glad that you talk about it, and I love your videos on TikTok talking about it and educating people about it and talking about your experience because I see a lot of videos about it. There's a lot. I see a ton, and then in each video, I read some of the comments, and there's a lot of people dealing with that. How did you find it for the first time? How did you come across it? How did you try it for the first time?
Interestingly enough, TikTok.
Oh, really?
TikTok is how I found out about it. I mean, so I had always, I'll just back up and kind of frame it a little bit. I started taking regular kratom going on almost 6 years now. And so you go in smoke shops and you can buy it. And I'd seen the packaging. I'd seen it before in passing, but I never checked it out. I just always got my kratom in and out. And so when I seen it on TikTok, I was like, oh, I know that stuff. And in the TikTok, this was before it would become a problem. The guy was actually promoting it, talking about it. And when he said that it was, 10 to 13 times more powerful than morphine, I had the thought in my head, this is going to be a problem. I knew me, I was going to go try it out. Now, fair warning, it is not in its concentrated form, it is 10 to 13 times more powerful than morphine. When you take it, it's not 10 to 13 times more powerful than morphine. So it's kind of weird the way they say it, but the big thing is the withdrawals of 7.0 are absolutely horrendous, horrible. You can argue all you want, people in the comments, but people have told me that it's worse than it can be worse than Fent, worse than H, and it's just it's really bad.
Yeah, man, and it's another one that's just it's that stuff it's no fun. And the thing that I found about trying to get off anything that had really bad withdrawals, you kind of just get scared and it builds up in your head. And I used for so many years to avoid that. I was like, oh, I can't go through withdrawals. I can't be sick, because I had cold turkey done that so many times, but I would always go back to it. And it's crazy too that you're able to just go to a smoke shop and buy it and stuff. Did you end up having to detox it without anything? Was there ever a time where you ran out or couldn't get it or whatever, or did you make sure that you always had it?
Yes, I have tried to quit cold turkey, and it's just not something that I could deal with. It is terrible. But even before that, even the kratom. Now, I am not against kratom. Kratom is natural. It is a healthy alternative to other opiate-like substances. I am an abuser of kratom. I mean, I'm talking, and this is going to sound crazy, 30, 40 pills at a time I was taking when I first found it. And so that alone can have some pretty gnarly withdrawals. And for the longest time, the kratom alone I was taking strictly to avoid the withdrawals. Not really getting high off it or anything like that, like maybe a 10-minute euphoric feeling. But aside from that, it's just a crash, anxiety, mood swings, anger. And that's why I stayed on the kratom so long. And the 7.0 is even worse.
Yeah, man. And I want to talk to you too about MAT treatment. I know that's something that you talk about on on your page. That's something that that I have years of experience with. I've been on Matt before. I think I'm only alive probably today because of the times that I ended up turning to Matt, because there was some scary times where I wasn't going to live much longer, and the Matt got me through. And I know it's a controversial topic when it comes to addiction, sobriety, recovery, but I've always been an advocate for it, with the disclaimer that it's not for everyone. It's not for every single person. And also that it's hard to get off. I'm very realistic about it. I'm all for it if you're someone that needs it, but at the same time, I try and be realistic in that, hey, look, it's a big decision. It's a decision you want to make responsibly. Can you talk about your experience with Suboxone and using it to get off of 7-0?
Absolutely, yeah. And just so you were on Suboxone or methadone, which route did you go?
Yeah, I for years was on Suboxone. I used to get methadone on the street. So if let's say I couldn't find any opiates, I was going to get super sick, then I would end up. I loved methadone. I loved it. It used to help me a lot when I was about to really go through it. But I was never actually prescribed that for a long period of time. That was just something that I got on the street. But I had years. I remember taking Suboxone before it was even a thing. Like the doctors barely knew what it was and stuff. This was a long time ago. It was crazy expensive. I literally paid. I remember one time I had to pay like $600-700 for the pills for the month, including the doctor and everything. It's not like it is today where it was covered by a bunch of stuff, Medi-Cal even, it was. But the way I looked at it at the time is I was like, I can't, I'm spending more than that a month on the other stuff, and I'm about to lose my life. So it's like paying that much, which was ridiculous at the time. I'm glad I did it now, looking back. But yeah, mainly Suboxone was my experience.
And you're off it now?
Yeah. Yeah. Off
Okay.
it now.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, man. I
Um,
mean, it's tough to get off, but I'm very grateful for it. I know I see, because I talked to a lot of people that were on it, and then they kind of hit a wall with it sometimes, and they decide they want to get off, and they try and get off too fast, and they don't titrate down, and they don't work with a doctor, and then they just tell people, "Oh, Suboxone sucks," and stuff like that. But it's like, for me, like, I'm grateful that I had it in the times that I needed it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's wisdom that you're speaking right there. So how did I get the mat? How did I go down the mat route? First off, you can use powdered kratom to taper off 7-Os. They both work on the mu opioid receptors. They're both partial agonists. I did try that. In fact, that's how I started posting TikToks. If you go back and look at my page, was when I was trying to get off the 7-Os. So I went from the powdered kratom to the extracts because the powdered kratom wasn't really working anymore. And then I went to the 7-Os. And so that's kind of the order of potency: powder, extracts, 7-Os. I try to taper down on the kratom, and it does work. I got down to maybe about 5 grams per day, which is about 10 capsules. But the lack of energy, the lack of motivation was just too much for me. Like, I'm a service plumber. I have to be out there. I have to do physical work. I have to drive around. Like, I have to be present, and I just can't go around with that low energy. And so after trying multiple times, many times, and I'm not recommending anyone go straight to MAT or straight to methadone or Suboxone. Like, there are healthy, or as healthy, there are less evasive options. So after trying the kratom multiple times, finally I decided to try the Suboxone. And so it wasn't a decision made lightly.
Yeah, man. And the thing is too, is like, it helps people. Like, there are people that it really helps. I think the key with MAT treatment is understand what you're getting into, understand what you're taking, understand kind of what it helps, the symptoms of it, how hard it is to get off, the journey and duration of the journey. How long am I on this? Like, oh, I go up in milligrams till I get to a certain point to where I even out. And then when I get off of it, I go down in milligrams to a certain point. Like, understand what you're doing. Don't just jump into it without knowing what you're getting into, but here's the thing. The one thing that really bothers me is I'm like pro recovery all the way. And I hate that some people that go on Matt get like attacked by other people that are in recovery. And the reason why I hate it is because the people that have to be on Matt, these are our worst of the worst. These are people that are battling addiction at the worst of the worst levels, These are people that some people just need the extra help, man. With this idea that, look, because I had so many friends. I remember when I started my Suboxone journey years ago when I was in rehab at one point. And I remember there was other people there that were in rehab that were, heroin addicts like myself. And they were saying, oh, dude, you can't be on that, this and that, like that's not sobriety. And literally every one of those people that said that to me are not alive today. All of them across the board. I'm talking like 7 different people that felt the need to be against it and probably needed the help, but were kind of like shamed away from getting the help. And it sucks looking back because it's like, man, I understand it's hard. I understand that eventually you have to rely on it. I understand that you have to take it every day. I understand that it's hard to get off, but at least you're alive and you have the opportunity to come up with a plan with medical professionals and eventually get off if you want. If you want to stay on, cool. At least at least you can go about your life, So that's the thing that kind of bothers me is when people are shamed away from getting the help that they need and then they end up passing away. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. The fear mongering going on out there is just unreal. So I missed the opiate train, so I'd never taken Suboxone, looked into Suboxone. I didn't even really know how it worked. And like you said, the key is to understand how it works. And I think a lot of these people that are against subs, it's for a couple of reasons, but I think the main one is they just don't understand. In a polite way, they're ignorant about how it actually works. It is a tool. It is an option to get off. And that brings me back to one of the main problems of 7-Os. Yes, it's an opiate and you got the mood swings and all the stuff that comes with it. But the financial implications of getting hooked on 7-Os, I think is kind of unmatched by other drugs. I've talked to people who have lost businesses, lost spouses, which is not, uncommon for people in addiction, but money, thousands and thousands of dollars. I've talked to people who have lost $20 plus $1,000, taking credit cards out and maxed them out just buying this stuff, so, and that's kind of where I was. I mean, I didn't do that much, but I was definitely, I'm just going to say it. I went broke. And then I started getting behind on bills, car payments, rent, all of that stuff. And so when I finally decided, like when I was looking at my options, Kratom's not working. I've tried it multiple times. I can tell myself that. I know I sincerely tried. Kratom's not working. I can't go to rehab. I can't do detox just because of my job and blah, 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 blah. What's this Suboxone do? Because it works for opiates. I've had some friends, I went into AA, so I've talked to some friends who have been through it. Let me look into it. And so the big thing about the fear mongering is just understanding that it's your decision. And I was faced between financial ruin, homelessness, possibly, I could have had people that I stayed with, but you're facing homelessness or subs. And I think the option is really easy. I mean, the choice is really easy when given those two.
Yeah, man. It's and that's the thing. I've seen people that were literally in prison their entire life. That the second they get out, they're IV drug users, stealing, everything you can think of. racking up felonies all the time, not able to hold a job, just chaos all the time. And I've seen them go in and out of recovery rooms and have a hard time staying sober. And then I've seen them get linked up with a legit doctor, working side by side with the doctor, go on MAT treatment and start building a life, and then I've seen them years later kind of either go down on it or maybe they stay on it for years, whatever is up to them. Like you said, it's their choice. But I see people get a life that were not able, that nothing else was working, and so I think that's what's cool is there's an option out there for those that for so many years never had an option. And one thing I always tell people too is, look, it's controversial. It always will be. Like you're never, if you're in the recovery space and you're on MAT, don't expect to convince people that you're doing the right thing. Like it doesn't matter what they think. Like if you are honest with yourself and you've tried everything else and you need the help and you decide to do it, just know that there's going to be people that are against it. Like that's what I kind of understood when I was on it for a while. I was like, look, like I'm not going to try and convince myself or convince these people that what I'm doing is right. I'm not going to try and justify it. I'm not going to try and change their mind. It's always going to be controversial, no matter what. It just always is. There will be people that are all for it and people that are completely against it and people in the middle. Do you find that it's just kind of this controversial thing amongst people in recovery?
Oh, it's so decisive. It's people are very passionate about taking Suboxone and MAT treatment and all. And I think I'll just touch on it because I think a lot of the fear of subs comes from people a lot of the fear of subs has to do with when you're ready to get off of it and the withdrawal effects. The withdrawal effects are very intense from what I'm told, and they last a very long time. The subs have the potential to give you dental issues as well because the strips are acidic and they can cause, cavities, gum problems if you're on them too long. And so the withdrawal effects, there are options these days that I don't think were available back when people were taking them, and that's the Sublocade shot, which is basically a time-release Suboxone. So the best thing, like I said, you got to understand how it works. How does Suboxone work? Well, basically, Suboxone is a partial agonist, but it has a very high affinity. And the affinity is the ability of that agonist to attach to the opiate receptor and bind to it tightly. So something like Fent 70H, it's a partial agonist. I'm sorry, it's a full agonist, but it has a lower affinity than Suboxone. And it's the buprenorphine within the Suboxone. So when you take it, the buprenorphine basically kicks the opiate off of the receptor, and then it binds to it partially activating it. So that partial activation gives you relief from the withdrawals and the cravings, right? And that is, and in the same way, the Sublocade shot is time release Suboxone. Basically, it's an injection, and instead of having to take in the strips every day, it's slowly being absorbed through the injection site.
Yeah, and that's something that I never tried. It wasn't around when I had Suboxone, but I'm glad that that's an option for people. And I've heard, and what's cool about that too is you kind of get in the habit of not having to take a pill every day, and it becomes less mental. And as I understand it, it's good for about 45 days, somewhere around there. And I'm glad to hear about that as well because, like you mentioned, a lot of the fear comes from the withdrawals and people being so scared to get off of it. And I've heard people talking about how it was a lot easier for them to get off the Sublocade shot. So I'm glad that's an option as well. Brandon, man, I appreciate you coming on. We're almost at an hour here. I appreciate you telling your story with alcohol and your experience and touching on your childhood and the things that you went through and then also bringing the perspective of talking about 7-0. I'm excited to hear more about that because it's a thing now. There's a lot of people that are dealing with it. I love that you talked about Matt as well. It's an area of recovery that I haven't had the opportunity to talk much about on here, but I'm glad we were able to get into that. I want to ask you now as kind of the last question. What would your advice be to someone who has been struggling for a long time, hasn't really tried recovery, hasn't tried to get sober, hasn't tried to get off the drugs, but they're starting to think about it now? They're kind of at that place that me and you eventually got to where they realize, hey, look, I need to do something about this. What would your advice be to them on just starting to turn their life around?
My advice would be to find support in any way that you can. Meetings, 12-step meetings. You can, depending on your city, like here in Phoenix, you can find one almost every hour somewhere. Or there's online support as well. I have a Discord channel, but it doesn't have to be there. But you've got to surround yourself with people, I think, that are that you can be honest with, that you can tell the truth to, that you can get their perspective and see how they overcame, their addiction. One of the biggest problems is isolation for people in addiction. That was my biggest issue, and it still is. I need to get back out there myself, but you got to realize you're not alone, and there are definitely options out there, especially like if you're struggling with 7-Os. It is your choice whether you're going to go medically assisted treatment or whatnot, but it's up to you. Educate yourself. Chat GPT, like all the stuff I'm talking about. Like I didn't go to college or anything like that. I just had a conversation with Chat GPT and just learn about what's actually going on. Learn about addiction. Learn about why it's important to understand your past and your traumas, and take action as best you can. That's you just got to start somewhere, and I think that support is a good place.
Brandon, thanks, man. I think that's amazing advice. And lastly, I'll ask you, where do people find you on TikTok? Where can they find your page and watch some of your videos about all the 7-0 and just sobriety in general?
Yeah, my TikTok name is Sober Now What. If you look at that, you'll see my videos. It's all based on 7-Os right now, but sobriety in general is where I'm kind of shifting my focus to, because as my name states, I'm sober. Now what? Getting sober is really just the first step. Then you got to figure out how to rebuild your life in a way that is fulfilling and sustainable.
Yeah, well said, man. I'm sober is like that, and that was exactly how I felt. It was like I felt like I was in the middle of the street, pitch dark outside. There's like a truck coming down the way. I'm in the headlights. I'm sober, but like, what do I do now? And I felt this urgency to change something, and I'm glad I did. So, Brandon, thank you, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.